Ladies and gentlemen,
This meeting is being recorded.
uh,
Yes,
I am
sir.
very happy to uh, I am very happy to join you people in this venture of analyzing, understanding philosophy and science today. Tomorrow, of course, we will have another session after evening. So today, I assume that we have common knowledge, of course. Something about science and technology we know already. We have already lived enough so that we know what are the sources of knowledge, etc. The language I use, you will be able to understand, I hope. Am I clear? Okay. So I will be touching upon two aspects of philosophy today. One is metaphysics, the other one is epistemology. And science, as all of us know, is trying to understand the nature. And of course, by understanding the nature, we are able to use science to produce technology. And technology, of course, will be helping us to organize our life in a far better manner than without the technology. So these are very important topics relating science to philosophy and society, of course. And this is the uh, good opportunity to share my thoughts with you people. And you could definitely ask me the doubts and criticisms and etc. They are all welcome. So let me begin. Physics generally is said to be theory of reality, and reality is a very, very general word. Philosophers are, of course, uh, used to use such terms in general way, and then, of course, define it as they go further into the examination of the concept. So let us say that metaphysics deals with reality, and reality is known by the knower or the person. And this mechanism to know and the process of knowing and the errors and correction and so on, all that belongs to epistemology. So we have knowledge of the reality, and reality out there exists, whether we want it or no. These two are interconnected. They are interconnected in such a way that reality out there could present itself in various forms, and we could know about that object through these means. In Indian philosophy, we call them pramanas, sources of knowledge. If you are talking about a tree outside my window, I see the tree and learn about the tree and maybe more details about it. It is a coconut tree, and there are coconuts on that tree, and so on. Like this, my visual perception has given me some knowledge, and that knowledge, using that, I describe the thing, or I claim that there is a tree. So this is an objective claim. I would say anyone else with normal eyesight would be able to see the tree and it is yielding coconuts, that also can be seen as I can see them. So if this is the way I move from my knowledge, which has come through sense experience, to the objective world, the knowledge about the tree. Tree exists in space and time, and that is what I am claiming. So in science too, our epistemology and our metaphysics both are connected. So in philosophy, we do talk about metaphysics and epistemology. Even in science, there is metaphysical aspect and epistemological aspect. So let us consider, for our own benefit, we talk about matter, for instance. The matter is, let us say a very broad word again, the matter could be solid objects, solid things which exist in space and time, and matter could be liquid like water and other spirit or some other kinds of liquid, or matter could be in the gaseous form. It could be gas, it could be oxygen, it could be nitrogen, it could be any other form of gas. So all these three are generally classified as material things in philosophy, and in science, of course, they may not call liquid and gases as material things, but in philosophy, we use a very general word. All the things that exist in the framework of space and time, that is, anything that is extended, anything that has volume, okay, and anything that has gone through some changes and would be going through changes further, and those things which are in space and time are called matter. Or let us also talk about different kinds of things within that. Physical objects, liquids and gases, all three are considered to be realities, and they exist in space and time, and because of that they undergo changes. They won't be as they are all the time. As time lapses or this thing change take place, and they can maybe change their form. For example, water can be in the solid form as well when it becomes ice, and before it was in the liquid form, perhaps it was in the gaseous form, hydrogen and oxygen, and these gases, when they combine with certain proportion, that is two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of oxygen, when they combine H2O, they form chemical bond H2O, and that H2O is said to be water. And like this, certain things can be in all the three forms, in the gaseous form or liquid form or solid form. And as you know, the cooking gas, we get it in cylinder, it is in the liquid form. And if you allow it to come out, it will become gas. So like this, almost all these material things can occupy three spaces. Even metal like iron can be melted and it can become liquid. So these are different states or different modes of existence of material things. Then there are certain things which we call thoughts or ideas. In philosophy, we have materialism, we have idealism, another form of philosophy where people do talk about ideas as real. What does that mean? Ideas are real is a little bit, difficult for us to imagine because we go with the physical world and then think of human beings and their thoughts and so on. But philosophers who are speaking of ideas as real, they are talking about, you know, consciousness, that is the subjectivity or ego or spirit, call it by any name, self even, that particular being has certain thoughts. And even those thoughts are mental in nature, and knowledge too is in that human mind. So it is also again in the form of thoughts in the mind. So all these even ideas are in the mind. All of these things are not physical entities, but they are sometimes called mental entities. It is the analogy of physical world. Entity is a physical entity we do talk about. Then philosophers, for want of better terms, they call thoughts, ideas, etc., mental entities. And these mental entities, they exist, of course, in human mind, but they don't have extension. They don't exist in space. That is what is the difference. The physical world, material world, exists in space and time both, whereas thoughts and ideas exist only in human mind, and only the person who has these thoughts and ideas can know them. So if you are a human being and if knowledge is mental in nature and all our reality is understood in terms of thought, so given that, obviously there is the question as to, do we know anything non-mental in nature? Idealists would ask these questions, and the answer they get is that anything that we know, it turns out to be mental again. So they try to say that everything that you see, everything you seem to hear, everything that you seem to perceive in any other form, all of them are eventually known as mental objects, mental things. So thus idealism, of course, is another philosophy that is developed. Now today we will concentrate more on materialism and the thoughts, which of course any philosophy would be, the thoughts that is contained in the human mind. So obviously we do take mind as granted, it has to be there, otherwise philosophy can't be there. And the third one I would like to talk about is the experience, subjectivity or spirit. Now this spirit is of peculiar kind. It is voluntary being. Voluntary is in some sense different from the events in nature. If you look at the clouds, clouds turn into rain and rain falls on the ground and water flows down wherever there is slope, etc. It goes towards the center of earth, and then that becomes later on maybe joins the river, river joins the sea, and so on. Now, this is happening in nature. We are not doing anything. At the most, we might be channelizing the water to go towards the river so that it doesn't flood our field. And again, the river naturally flows towards whatever side is the down slope, and it goes towards sea. Sea is the lowest point. It doesn't go beyond sea anywhere because that is the lowest point that we have on the surface of Earth. Now, human beings have the freedom. What does it mean? We are able to move. In other words, we walk, we run. We are able to initiate certain things. For example, if we want to pluck some mangoes, maybe we are able to throw the stones at the mangoes tree and the mangoes might fall down. And all these are actions. Human actions are caused by or are initiated by human freedom, and the who initiates, that is called agent or the spirit. So this spirit is not perceivable directly. I perceive my spirit, all right, in the sense that I know I want to eat something. I walk towards the kitchen and pick up something that is, cooked, and then take it in a plate and eat it. So all these are activities performed by me. But if my computer wants power, electricity, it cannot go and plug on and get the electricity and so on. So that is mechanical world, or that is fully determined by the laws of nature. So when we talk about laws of nature, etc., that is the mechanical world or the world as it is out there. And when we talk about ideas and thoughts and so on, we talk about our own mental world. But when we talk about voluntary actions or, movements and so on, or eating, sleeping, talking, all these things are voluntary actions, and we are free human beings, we could do all that. Similarly, animals also have limited freedom. They can also move and fight or collect food, eat, and so on, build nests and so on. So all these are about the metaphysical discussion. So metaphysically, there are material objects, there are thoughts and ideas, and there are beings, souls, spirits. These three things do exist in some way. Some people use the word, instead of existence, subsistence. Subsistence means, it exists, but in a different form, not in space and time and so on. So these are the realities. But let us now come to the knowledge of them. How do we know them? These are realities or they exist, etc. One is the commonsensical beginning of this discussion would be, yes, I have my 5 sense organs and I use these sense organs to perceive the objects, physical world out there. So when I look at the tree, yes, I see the, its length, breadth, and other things. and that is my vision. If I am able to touch it, I can feel whether it is hot or cold. I can also see whether it is smooth or rough and so on. All these things touch can give me. If I can hear the sound, if the water is flowing and it is making sound, Jalataranga is making some sound, I can perceive that, okay? And I can also hear the sound of bird, chirping of the birds, or if the vehicles are going, I can, hear the mechanical sound of that vehicle. And if the driver horns, I can hear that sound and so on. So here we hear the sound, and of course from that we know something, and certain things we taste and know the taste of that thing, food item especially. We try to know whether salt is adequate or more or less and so on by tasting. And if we are making sweet dishes, we try to know how much sugar should be put and so on. So that taste is perceived through tongue, and we have, of course, nose, which can help us to perceive the odor, fragrance, foul smell, and so on. And through skin, we can touch, the heat and, cold, as well as hardness and smoothness, and sometimes the shape of the physical object. Blind people are able to experience. They develop their touch sense so much that they can even distinguish, different notes without seeing them. We may not be able to, those who have vision, they may not be able to develop their ability to that extent. And they can also develop their ability to read and write in Braille scripture. So all these things are again touch sensation. So we have 5 sense organs. We have 5 dimensions of reality we might be knowing. Sometimes there might be overlap. For example, by touch, I can see that a rod is straight. I can also see it and see it as straight and so on. There is overlap. Similarly, I can see that my ball is spherical, and I can also touch it and feel it that it is spherical. And similarly, I can, see that the slope is slippery and carefully walk. I can also touch and feel that it is slippery and so on. So sometimes there is overlap, and, Indian philosophers do talk about spatial abilities, like, you see the, hot plate, and you don't touch it, you see the hot plate, and you can also touch it and feel it. Of course, you might burn your finger. So like that, we have extraordinary ability to perceive the object of another sense organ and so on. So however, all these are knowledge gathered through sense perception. We also speak about sometimes error in perception. Again, there are debates about, rope snake illusion. You perceive a rope as snake in a garden, maybe in the evening when it is darkening. Suddenly you see something, a rope as or a pipe as snake and so on. Like this, there can be several optical illusions, and a straight line might appear to be, bent, because you are seeing it in a particular through a certain kind of glass or whatever. So like this, there are optical illusions, holograms are possible, and so on. So there can be illusions or misperceptions, which we correct, of course, to the extent possible using our own experiences of various kind. There can be tools we develop, and then tools can help us to correct ourselves. That is how people who have short sight or long sight are able to read, even small letters and so on. So sense perception is one way we know the reality. But these realities, whatever we know through sense perception, they'll be one at a time. In other words, we have to pay our attention. Our attention can be paid only for a fraction of a second. And of course, after that, we can shift it to another thing. If two things are happening, flickering is happening, we pay attention so much that we see off and on both. So it appears as though they are simultaneous, but they aren't. So we perceive only one thing at a time. If we are paying attention to the smell, we are not able to pay attention to the vision. If we are able to pay attention to the vision, how it looks like, then odor we will forget or will not be able to pay attention to. But it looks as though we are seeing things, hearing things simultaneously and so on. But psychologists tell us that that is not the case. But anyway, what is important to note here is all that we know is the particularity of things. We might have learned something about past. We might be knowing now about certain things, and we might know something about the future. But when it comes, future becomes present, then we can know. But all of them are particular knowledge, specific knowledge, which belongs to a particular object and so on. But science has to speak about truth, which is general. They also talk about particularity, and they also talk about generality. For example, they talk about gravitational force. Gravitational force is about all objects, not only objects on Earth, even objects on Moon, objects on Sun maybe, or any other planet, any other, solar system, and so on. So gravitational law seems to be universal law, and also seems to be applicable to the things that have been there and gone now, destroyed, the things that are there now, and the things that will be created maybe or come into existence in future. How can human beings know such truths like gravitational force? Or if you have to put it in a more scientific way, each object attracts each other object. If you talk in such a general term, how did you know this? How are you able to know this? Now, there are several theories how you know it. One theory will be that we, from experience, we are able to generalize them, and that is what is called induction. And then we talk about in general terms. And the other theory that talks about, which is of course, a Kantian theory. There is something mental which is inborn. He talks about categories and so on. And of course, within our mental structure, according to Kant, there are certain things that we cannot avoid. It is there, inborn. If you want to call it instinct, that's a different language, of course. He would like to call it category and some kind of very general concept and so on. For example, cause and effect, these are two terms which we know. And he says we are born with this capacity where we say that something is the cause. If you say, then immediately we are drawn our attention to what would be its effect. And if we say something is the effect, immediately our attention is drawn to what is its cause. So we will be talking about cause and effect both as, concepts which you have learned together. We have to keep them always together. So Kant talks about these are a priori. Categories are a priori. That means simply not learned through sense perception. It is something that is mental in nature. It is something that we are gifted, if you want to call it that way, but it is not learned through sense perception. So there are examples of that kind. For instance, a simple kind of thing, a stick must have two ends. Same thing is true of ropes. If there are ropes, they must have two ends. How did we learn this? We have not observed the rope which are not manufactured at all. They will be done maybe tomorrow, day after, and so on, after a year, and so on. I'm able to talk about them just now. I could not have perceived them at all because they have not come into existence. Yet I am able to talk truth about them. All the sticks will have two ends. Now, I am able to talk about sticks that may be in another country which I have not seen at all. And there nobody communicated, nobody told me, yet I am able to speak about them. So some truths I know through some people some philosophers use the term intuition. And Kant has used the term a priori. I know it a priori. And maybe some of these so-called logical laws, everything is what it is, for example. This one, I have not checked everything. Yet I am able to say that everything is what it is. So everything is what it is, a universal truth. And this universal truth, I am able to know. And it is a law of thought. Similarly, one can talk about law of excluded middle and law of contradiction, that both P and not P cannot be true together. And, this I know, in the binary logic, it is true forever. So it may happen in different kind of logic, different kind of things can happen, but in binary logic, that is true. Similarly, law of excluded middle. Either you are alive or dead. One of the things has to be true. And so these things are known to us, these logical laws are known a priori, not through sense perception. So this is the logical laws. Similarly, one might talk about, the scientific laws, gravitational law. Do we know it like that, a priori? No, it doesn't seem to be the case. At least some evidences have to be there. And this, after observing certain things, Like in geometry, for example, what is geometrical truth? The geometrical truth is theoretically true, logically true, also empirically true. It is true in space and time, and it is true in thoughts as well. So these are truths which are known like that. But some of these laws of science, which we discover after experimentation, you know, several trial and error methods and so on, and we perhaps know them, but how do we know them is a big question. We general, things cannot be perceived. General instances can be, of those general things can be perceived. So that means some kind of, I can see that a triangle with a certain, let us say, measurement, let's say bottom as 6 inches and the angles at both the ends, 60-degree, and I draw a triangle and say that you draw any number of triangles with this measurement, they will be identical. All of them will have the same properties. How did I learn? I learned it through the law of identity. I learned that there all the properties are identical because their measurements are identical. The side and the uh, two angles I gave are 60 degrees. So rest of the things follow. The third angle also is 60-degree, and it is a triangle with identical sides as well. So law of identity will give me the idea all triangles are having the same property, and it is a general statement. In a sense, intuitively are generalized, but there is no inductive leap. Philosophers talk about inductive leap. You observe from observed cases to unobserved cases, you jump. Crows are black. 1 crow, 2 crow, 100 crow, 1,000 crow. All the crows you observed so far are black, and thus you conclude that all crows are black. But there are cases, exceptions, which are where crows are not, perfectly black. Ravens are black, maybe. So, like this, or you have swans, which are of different color, not always white, and so on. So, without observing, you cannot talk about things that exist, but you have not perceived them, observed them. So, there can be error when you generalize like that. But in the case of triangle, absolutely there is no doubt. So identity is the law which we applied here, which we have learned through reason or intuitively or instinctively. So some scientific laws perhaps we can show like this, but others, scientists say, some of the groups of scientists say that scientific laws are probable, almost 100%, but they are not 100%. So there remains a chance factor, something that we don't know at all. So they talk about probability. There are others who talk about theory in science, and we derive a hypothesis, and then that hypothesis we confirm and take scientific law as true and absolutely true. And if there is some occasion where we notice the exception, then we modify our theory and so on. So there are like this general truths can be known in this way, but whether science gives us 100% truth or it is probabilistic, and if you are talking about probabilistic truth, there is a big question, that is, how much reality do we know? we have 5 sense organs and we have 5 different knowledge. And this, when you are dealing with epistemology, you will notice that, there are always different animals who have different abilities. For example, visual perceptions, and we perceive when there is normal light. But there are carnivorous animals who can see things at night. And also, there are certain other animals, perhaps, they can see at night, but we cannot see. And similarly, sound, we can hear certain only wavelength, whereas elephants communicate in a different wavelength. We can't hear any elephants communicating. Bats communicate at different level, you know, and bats, can hear their own echo of their sound and then find their way to fly and so on. Smells, the dogs can sniff the weapon used for murdering someone and then identify the person even after 2-3 days. So the dogs are far better than human beings in smelling and identifying and so on. Similarly, taste, cattle can enjoy grass and lions cannot. And lions can enjoy meat, cattle cannot. Human beings perhaps cannot enjoy, grass, but they can enjoy meat maybe. So taste is, again, people enjoy, or individuals or living beings enjoy different things. Touch, animals can and birds can sense that there is going to be earthquake, whereas human beings take time. So sense of touch again is different for different animals. If we put human beings versus animals and so on, we hardly know half of the reality. They know large part of reality. We have not discussed about earthworm, insects, and other life forms. God only knows what all they know, what all they eat, what all they hear, whether they can hear at all, or so on and so forth. We know snakes can, vibration is the one which they immediately sense, for example. So like this, there are the last, a wide variety of reality we just don't know. We know only what we perceive from 5 sense organs. And if our sense organs is limited, we extend its ability. For example, we have technology to hear sounds. See, for example, I am talking here miles away, so many thousands miles away, perhaps, and you are able to hear me. So, like this, technology can extend our ability to perceive senses. We can use telescope and observe moon more carefully. We can use microscope and even observe white blood cells in our blood and bacteria and so on. So technology, of course, can help us to know further, but we cannot have sixth sense organ, seventh sense organ. We cannot, experience the experience of bat, because bat has a different ability we don't have. So it might have a different ability to even conceive and so on. So our epistemology, our sources of knowledge is sense perception and reason, logic, and we might use, the other sources like comparison, intuition, and revelation also some people talk about when it comes to religious truth and so on. And we know about ourselves in the sense that we examine ourselves and we try to know. We have emotions, we have weaknesses, we have strength of certain kind, we have self-control, we can become more alert, and we can, become lethargic and so on. All these are about our soul. Soul is a certain kind of reality that we know, but scientists have not gone too far in exploring what is soul. Psychologists go to some extent of, trying to understand what is our mind, and mind is in a way part of spirit or associated with spirit. So thoughts and ideas and experience and the voluntariness, action and so on, these are the domains which scientists have not explored fully, but in future maybe they will find a way of exploring all these things. But whatever we know, even the material world or the matter, even that is questioned by several scientists themselves as well as philosophers. For example, you know, uncertainty principle of Heisenberg, in quantum physics, for example, and in medical science, naturopathy, homeopathy, Ayurveda, allopathy, they are all having different theories and different kinds of knowledge. They claim to cure certain diseases, and which one is true, which one is not true, we are not able to decide. Do they have some kind of domain of their own operation? Again, we don't know. There is, there are philosophers like Thomas Kuhn and, the Feyerabend, Paul Feyerabend. All these people try to show that science is not absolute. It is not giving us the truth in an absolute sense. The only absolute truth is that there are no absolute truth. This is what Feyerabend says. Everything seems to be temporary or related and so on. And Kuhn talked about, paradigm shift, what you take as the so-called, touchstone, which cannot be false at all. Even that changes. So in science, this has been changing. They have studied history of science and given this kind of opinion. And then philosophers like Duhem and Quine, they talked about holism. And even Wittgenstein talks about holism, linguistic holism. Or in order to understand a sentence in language, Wittgenstein says you need to know the language. In other words, you need to know all the aspects of language. So like this, if all these are true, obviously the Newtonian science, which we thought is absolute, and we have discovered the eternal truth, which are of course laws of thought, laws of science, laws of nature, which are again suspect. So epistemology is also suspect. So therefore, phenomenology, phenomenological philosophers talk about what is the reality. Do we ever know the real truth apart from what we have perceived, what we have imagined, what we have conceived? Therefore, science needs to be revised as and when we feel the need. I stop here and welcome the questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your enlightening lecture. I believe that we have many questions from the participant sides from what we have just given us. Sir has spoken about the limitation of science or our scientific understanding of reality from epistemological and metaphysical angle. And he has shown us the extent to which human mind can reach through our senses and experiences, and that it has shaped our reality. And but beyond that, there are some things that we know which seems to be beyond our scientific grasp. So I'm going to invite some questions from the students. We might not be able to take all the questions since time is limited, but I'm sure that there will be questions coming very soon in the chat box. And while we wait for the questions, I'd like to, oh yes, there is this one question. I think, sir, I'll just read it out for you. There is a question in the chat box from Brandon, our 6th semester students in the philosophy department. He asked a question like this: let's take empirical method as the principal hallmark of science. However, architects use empirical methods and we don't wish to call them scientists. Right, so in the light of this, do you think first idea that science uses deduction making hypotheses and trying to refute or disprove them? How do we distinguish science from pseudoscience? I believe that's the main question.
Okay. Empirical method, J.S. Mill, for instance, has talked about 5 methods. I could not mention it even. He talks about so-called experimental methods of inquiry, method of agreement, method of difference, joint method of agreement and difference, the method of residue, the method of concomitant variation. The critics of Mill have pointed out that these methods at best are talking about correlation, and science is trying to understand cause and effect relationships. These methods cannot give cause-effect relationship, and without getting into the detail, as I mentioned, all our sense perceptions are observation